February 8, 1945. A skeletal man in striped prison rags grips the controls of a Nazi bomber. His hands tremble. He weighs 40 kilograms. He hasn't touched an aircraft in 14 months. Behind him, 9 fellow prisoners cling to the bare metal fuselage, starving, shoeless, and barely breathing. German guards are already shooting. One tire just exploded. The runway is running out. This isn't a tunnel escape, not a forged document. 10 concentration camp inmates are attempting to steal the camp commandant's personal bomber and fly it off Hitler's most secret island, Peenemünde, home of the V-2 rocket program, ringed by electrified fences, patrol boats, and anti-aircraft guns. No prisoner has ever left this place alive. And here's what the Nazis don't know. The man at the controls was once one of the Soviet Union's deadliest fighter aces. He's been hiding his identity for 14 months, waiting for exactly this moment. But 10 starving men can barely swing a shovel. Can they lift a 14-ton bomber off the ground? And what happens when Soviets spot Nazi crosses over their ski? Peenemünde exists for one purpose: building weapons that could turn the war. The V-2 ballistic missile, the world's first guided rocket, and the slave laborers who assemble its components, haul its materials, and clear its runways are never meant to leave. Barbed wire and the frigid Baltic Sea form the walls. Armed patrol boats circle every shore around the clock. Searchlights sweep the dark waters each night, hunting for shadows that move wrong. Even if a prisoner somehow slipped through the electrified perimeter, the freezing sea would kill him in minutes. And if he somehow stayed afloat, German patrols would finish the job. 3 days before Devyatayev arrived at this particular hell, 2 inmates tried to swim to the mainland under cover of darkness. The SS caught them before they reached the water. They hanged both men at the camp gates at dawn and forced every prisoner, all 800 of them, to watch the bodies twist for 6 hours. The lesson required no words. Your labor belongs to the Reich. Your life ends here. Anyone who disagrees will decorate the gallows. Devyatayev works for the Death Brigade, the most dangerous assignment in the entire camp system. Each morning at 5 o'clock, guards march his crew onto the airfield to fill bomb craters from Allied raids and drag away unexploded ordnance with bare hands. Just skeletal men carrying 500-pound bombs across broken concrete, knowing that one stumble, one jostle, one wrong vibration would turn them into red mist. The survivors, if any remain standing by dusk, collapse in their bunks only to be kicked awake for the night shift hauling construction materials. Rations amount to watery turnip soup and a crust of bread that barely qualifies as food. Devyatayev can count every one of his ribs. His cheekbones jut like knife blades beneath paper-thin skin. The average Death Brigade prisoner lasts 3 weeks before his body simply stops. He knows what's coming. The Eastern Front is collapsing. Soviet forces push closer every day. And when the Red Army gets near enough to threaten Peenemünde, the SS will liquidate the entire labor force to bury evidence of what happened here. The rocket program's secrets must never reach Allied hands, and neither can the witnesses to how those secrets were built. Waiting for liberation isn't survival. It's a slower execution with the same ending. But then Devyatayev notices something. Every day at precisely 12 o'clock, a siren wails across the island. Lunch. And every German on Peenemünde, without exception, drops what they're doing and walks to the mess hall. Guards, pilots, mechanics, and engineers. One afternoon, while hauling debris near the runway, Mikhail watches a carpenter stop mid-swing, hammer still raised over an undriven nail, and amble toward the canteen without a backward glance. The nail stays half sunk in the wood. For 30 precious minutes, the airstrip sits nearly empty. The watchtower guards grow lazy, attention drifting toward their own growling stomachs. And one particular aircraft, a twin-engine Heinkel He 11-1 bomber belonging to the camp commandant himself, gleams on the tarmac with no one watching it. What the Germans don't know, what no one at Peenemünde suspects, is that the skeletal prisoner pushing a wheelbarrow of rubble is not an infantryman named Nikitenko. His real name is Mikhail Petrovich Devyatayev, senior lieutenant of the Soviet Air Force. He flew 180 combat missions before anti-aircraft fire shredded his Aerocobra over Lviv in July 1944. He downed 9 German aircraft in aerial combat. He was one of the Soviet Union's best pilots. When the Nazis captured him in the wreckage, he knew what would happen if they discovered his identity. The Luftwaffe executed captured enemy pilots on sight, considering them too dangerous to imprison. So in the chaos of a POW transfer, Devyatayev swapped identity tags with a dead infantryman and became Nikitenko, a nobody, worth keeping alive for slave labor. For 14 months, he's hidden his secret. Now that secret might be the only thing that saves his life. The plan forms in pieces over 2 weeks of careful observation. 30 minutes. That's the lunch window. Storm the bomber during the meal break. Overpower whatever skeleton guard crew remains, start the engines, and lift off before the Germans finish their sausages and return to find their commandant's aircraft missing. It sounds suicidal. The chances hover somewhere between slim and none. But Devyatayev spends every waking moment mapping the operation. He tracks every patrol route, memorizes every guard rotation, notes every mechanic's habit and schedule. He feigns a stumble near the parked Heinkel to test response times, counting the seconds before anyone reacts. He watches which direction the sentries face at 12:05, at 12:10, at 12:15. The gap exists. Narrow, fragile, but real. If you're finding this story as unbelievable as I did when I first researched it, hit like and subscribe, because what these men pull off next makes the planning phase look like the easy part. He can't do this alone. Mikhail may be desperate, but he's also rail-thin, half-starved, and barely strong enough to lift a shovel. Overpowering an armed German guard requires muscle he no longer has. More importantly, it requires trust. One whispered word to the wrong person, one loose-lipped conspirator hoping to trade information for an extra ration, and the Gestapo will have all 10 of them hanging from the gallows by nightfall. In a camp where men sell each other out for a crust of bread, finding 9 accomplices willing to die for freedom is nearly as impossible as the escape itself. He recruits carefully, feeling out desperation levels, testing loyalty in small ways before revealing anything. Even Krivonogov, a former coal miner from Donbass, built like a bull despite the starvation, still capable of swinging a weapon with lethal force. Vladimir Sokolov, an aircraft mechanic who understands engines. Pyotr Kutorgin, quick-thinking and resourceful. 8 others, each selected for a specific combination of desperation, silence, and remaining physical capability. They form a pact in hushed voices during a rare moment without guards. All 10 escape together or all 10 die together. No man left behind. The night before the attempt, Devyatayev lies on his wooden bunk, staring at the ceiling, rehearsing every second of the operation. He's placed his life in the hands of 9 dying men. If one hesitates at the critical moment, if one guard happens to glance in the wrong direction, the gallows will have 10 new guests by sunset. Sleep doesn't come. What none of them know yet: the plane they're about to steal has a security feature that will almost destroy everything before they even leave the ground. February 8th, 1945. The sky hangs gray and cold over Peenemünde. At precisely noon, the siren screams across the island. Devyatayev and his 9 chosen men shuffle onto the airfield, pushing a wheelbarrow, shovels in hand, looking like any other work detail assigned to fill potholes. Beneath the threadbare uniforms, hearts pound against rib cages. Across the tarmac, German personnel stream toward the mess hall in loose clusters, laughing, lighting cigarettes. Within 90 seconds, the vast airstrip empties of nearly all activity. One armed sentry remains, a bored-looking private pacing beside the commandant's Heinkel bomber. His rifle hangs loose on its strap. Mikhail catches the eyes of his men, a barely perceptible nod. Now. 10 ragged prisoners veer off their assigned path and move directly toward the parked aircraft. The guard notices the approaching group and frowns, confused. He raises one hand in a halt gesture, the other reaching for his rifle strap. "What are you doing? Get back to your..." Ivan Krivonogov is already moving. He's been hiding a sharpened iron scrap in his sleeve for 6 days, stolen from a demolished building and ground to a point against concrete. 2 strides close the distance. 1 swing ends the guard's life. The blade catches the German's throat before he can finish his sentence. He drops without a sound, dead before his knees hit the tarmac. For 1 frozen heartbeat, nobody breathes. Then Pyotr Kutorgin catches the falling rifle, drops to his knees, and strips the uniform off the corpse in 8 seconds flat. Blood soaks into the gray wool as he pulls the tunic over his skeletal frame. They roll the body into a drainage ditch beside the runway. The SS uniform hangs off Kutorgin like a scarecrow's rags, but from 20 meters, he might pass. Rifle in hand, posture forced into rigid military bearing, he becomes their camouflage. They just bought themselves 60 seconds. Devyatayev sprints to the bomber, vaults onto the wing, and wrenches at the cockpit hatch. The handle doesn't move. Locked. His heart stops. 14 months of planning, weeks of observation, 9 men risking everything, and they're undone by a door latch. He doesn't let panic take hold. He rips open a small maintenance panel beside the hatch, snakes his arm into the narrow gap, and feels around until his fingers find the internal release lever. A click. The canopy pops open. He throws himself into the pilot's seat. The instrument panel spreads before him, a bewildering array of dials, switches, and levers, every one labeled in Gothic German script. Fuel pump, throttle, magnetos, mixture controls, engine primers. He's never sat in a Heinkel cockpit before this moment. But for weeks, while hauling wreckage, Devyatayev pocketed cracked instrument plates and memorized their labels by candlelight. He eavesdropped on German mechanics running engine checks, positioning himself close enough to watch which levers they pulled, which switches they flipped, in what sequence. Those stolen lessons guide his hands now. Fuel valves open, magnetos engaged, throttle cracked, mixture set. He flips the ignition, but nothing. The engines cough once, sputter, and die. Devyatayev's blood turns to ice. He checks the gauges frantically. Then he sees it, the battery indicator. The needle sits flat at 0. The Germans removed the external power cart as a routine security precaution. Without it, this 14-ton bomber is a steel coffin that will never leave the ground. Behind him, 9 starving men stare with hollow eyes. Outside, the airfield sits silent. The lunch break is ticking away minute by minute. And somewhere across the island, hundreds of Germans are finishing their meals. How much longer before someone notices the commandant's bomber has uninvited guests? Devyatayev doesn't freeze. He forces his mind to work. He remembers watching the morning routine. Every day before flight operations, ground crews wheel a heavy battery cart to the Heinkel's belly and hook it up for engine start. The Germans must have stored it nearby, which means this isn't over yet. He drops from the cockpit, hits the tarmac, and sprints toward a small maintenance shed 50 meters away. 2 prisoners follow without being told. Behind them, Kutorgin stands beside the bomber in his stolen uniform, gripping the dead guard's rifle, praying no one looks closely at his trembling legs or the blood soaking through the gray wool. Inside the shed, they find it. A squat metal trolley trailing power cables, exactly what Devyatayev remembers seeing mechanics wheel out each morning. They seize the handles, shove it through the doorway, and race it back toward the bomber across open ground. The trolley's wheel catches on broken concrete, nearly toppling the whole apparatus. Precious seconds lost wrestling it free. Devyatayev drags the cables to the Heinkel's external power port, fumbling the heavy connectors with shaking hands, clamping them down. He scrambles back into the pilot seat, fuel valves still open, magnetos engaged. He hits ignition. The engines cough, catch, and roar to life with a thunderous growl that echoes across the island. The airframe shudders beneath him. Behind him, men sob with relief, unable to believe the impossible just became possible. But the celebration lasts half a second. That engine noise carries. Every German on Peenemünde can hear it. Klaxons erupt across the facility. Shouts echo from every direction. Through the cockpit glass, Devyatayev sees gray uniforms pouring from hangars and buildings, pointing at the taxiing bomber, screaming orders. The 30-minute window just collapsed to 30 seconds. He shoves the throttle forward. The twin propellers bite air. The bomber lurches ahead, wheels rumbling over concrete. Mikhail's plan is simple. Get airborne. Fast. But the Heinkel has other ideas. One engine pulls harder than the other, creating asymmetric thrust. The tail swings wildly to the right. Instead of rolling straight down the runway, the aircraft carves a spinning arc across the tarmac, kicking up dust and debris. Devyatayev wrestles the yoke and rudder pedals, fighting the aircraft with arms that have almost nothing left. He's too weak to muscle the heavy controls. Behind him, SS officers drop to their knees at the runway edge and open fire with pistols. Bullets ping off the hull. A tire explodes with a sharp crack, but the He 11-1 keeps rolling, momentum carrying it forward even as it lurches sickeningly to one side. Devyatayev fights the yoke left, manages to straighten the nose, and aims the wounded bomber down the main runway. A German gun crew scrambles to man an anti-aircraft emplacement, cranking the barrel around to track the accelerating aircraft. More soldiers sprint toward the runway from every direction, firing as they run. The Heinkel picks up speed, engines howling at full power. The runway stretches ahead, 300 meters to the end, 200, 100. The yoke won't pull back. The bomber is too heavy, and Devyatayev's starving arms can't generate enough force to rotate the nose. Will 10 dying men become 10 burning corpses at the edge of the runway? Devyatayev rips off his striped camp jacket, leaving only a filthy undershirt. He plants both feet hard against the rudder pedals for leverage, grips the yoke until his knuckles go white, and hauls back with everything left in his wasted body. The nose doesn't move. Wind screams through a shattered side window where a bullet punched through. Flak fragments punch new holes in the tail section. 2 prisoners crawl forward from the fuselage, squeeze into the cramped cockpit beside him, and throw their weight onto the control column. 3 starving men pulling together against a machine designed for well-fed Luftwaffe pilots. 50 meters of runway remaining. 30, 20. The perimeter fence fills the windscreen, barbed wire gleaming in the pale winter sun. The yoke moves, 1 inch, 2. The nose lifts. With a convulsive shudder and a groan of protesting metal, the Heinkel He 111 breaks free of the concrete and claws into the air. The landing gear clears the perimeter fence by less than 2 meters. They're airborne. Inside the fuselage, emaciated men weep, laugh, scream, grab each other in disbelief. Below them, the airfield shrinks rapidly, Nazi guards scattering like disturbed ants as their commandant's personal bomber climbs away into the gray February sky. Against every calculation, against every expectation, 10 prisoners are flying free. Devyatayev banks east, hands locked on the controls, heart slamming against his ribs. He's flying. Actually flying. A stolen Nazi bomber, piloted by a man the Germans think is a dead infantryman. But escape from the ground isn't escape from the war. Within minutes, Peenemünde will radio every Luftwaffe squadron in range. He spots dark specks rising behind them. Focke-Wulf 190S, the fastest interceptors in German service, scrambling to kill 10 prisoners who just delivered the most humiliating security breach of the war. The Heinkel has no defensive gunners, no ammunition, no parachutes, no radio. Devyatayev pushes into a bank of gray cloud and holds his breath. Minutes pass. The cloud swirls around the cockpit, visibility dropping to nothing. He holds course east by compass, not daring to descend. The men sit in terrified silence, listening for cannon fire. When he finally drops below the cloud base, the sky behind them is empty. The fighters have broken off, unable to find their quarry. He lets out a breath he's been holding for 10 minutes. They've outrun the Luftwaffe. What happens when a German bomber with Nazi crosses painted on its wings flies into Soviet airspace? Devyatayev navigates by the winter sun and a stolen Luftwaffe map folded on his lap. His eyes ache from strain. Behind him, the escapees huddle in the bare metal fuselage, some praying, some staring at nothing. The front lines emerge below after nearly an hour, a scarred patchwork of snow, smoke, and shell craters where Nazi-occupied territory meets Soviet-held land. Freedom lies beyond that river, but the Heinkel still wears German insignia. Iron crosses mark the wings and tail. To every Red Army gunner on the ground, this aircraft is the enemy. The moment they cross into Soviet airspace, anti-aircraft batteries open fire. Black flak bursts erupt around the cockpit. Shrapnel rattles against the fuselage. Devyatayev yanks the stick, throws the bomber into evasive maneuvers, but a shell detonates directly against the right wing. The explosion tears through the aircraft. Shrapnel shreds control surfaces, hydraulic lines, fuel feeds. The starboard engine coughs, belches black smoke, and dies. 2 prisoners scream, bleeding from fragment wounds. The bomber shudders, dips, begins spiraling toward the frozen earth. Mikhail fights the dying aircraft with one functioning engine and failing controls. He spots a frozen field through the smoke-streaked cockpit glass and aims for it, bleeding altitude. One chance. He lines up the clearing, cuts the throttle, and braces. The wheels slam into frozen ground, skip once, dig in hard. The Heinkel plows across the snow-covered field, slewing sideways as the damaged landing gear collapses. Metal screams against ice. The fuselage tears through a snowdrift, spins 90 degrees, and comes to rest with a final groan of twisted aluminum. Silence, then groaning, then laughter mixed with sobs. One by one, 10 prisoners crawl from the shattered wreckage into the freezing February air. They collapse onto the snow, staring at the sky, unable to process what they've survived. One man scoops up a handful of snow and presses it to his lips. Another falls to his knees and weeps. They did it. Their relief lasts 90 seconds. Soviet soldiers swarm the crash site, rifles raised, shouting orders. Devyatayev stumbles forward on legs that barely support him, hands up. "Comrades, we are Soviet. We escaped from Peenemünde." The soldiers don't lower their weapons. These men emerged from a German aircraft. They could be spies, saboteurs, commandos in stolen uniforms. Within an hour, all 10 sit handcuffed in an NKVD interrogation cell, answering questions from men who clearly don't believe their impossible story. Stalin's Soviet Union doesn't trust miraculous survivors. Any soldier who allowed himself to be captured was, by doctrine, a traitor or coward. And these men claim to have stolen a bomber from Hitler's most secret facility? The interrogators laugh. For 9 years, Mikhail Devyatayev remains under suspicion, his heroism buried, his name blacklisted, his story dismissed as fantasy or collaboration. He works menial jobs, forbidden from flying, forbidden from speaking publicly. Meanwhile, in Berlin, the stolen bomber sends shockwaves through Nazi high command. A furious Hermann Göring reportedly orders the Peenemünde commandant's execution for the most humiliating security breach of the war. Hitler allegedly expresses disbelief that starving prisoners accomplished what trained soldiers never attempted. Only in 1957, years after Stalin's death, does the truth emerge. The Soviet government suddenly rehabilitates Devyatayev and awards him the hero of the Soviet Union. The reason for the reversal? The intelligence he brought back. During his months at Peenemünde, Devyatayev memorized everything he could observe. Launch coordinates, facility layouts, technical specifications of the V2 program. Information he carried in his head across the Baltic and delivered to Soviet intelligence despite their initial refusal to believe him. Information that helped Soviet engineers build their own ballistic missiles. Information that seeded the space race. 10 starving men in a stolen bomber didn't just escape a concentration camp, they carried secrets that reshaped the Cold War. Mikhail Devyatayev lived until 2002, the last surviving member of the 10 who flew to freedom that February afternoon. He never stopped telling the story, and he never forgot those 8 seconds at the end of the runway when 3 dying prisoners pulled a yoke together and lifted a 14-ton machine into the sky. If you want to see another impossible escape, one involving another death camp and some prisoners impersonating Nazis, watch this video next.